So what we're doing today, determining equations from data, is related in some ways to the determining equations from a graph, except we're not given an entire graph. We're given, in this case, a couple of points and the period. And you could maybe kind of graph it from that. Like, well, you could, because you can come up with the equation from it. But you know what I mean? Like you could sketch part of it, and that might be a really great strategy, is sketch what you know. But you can see how it's a bit different. Every question is different. And that's really important. That's on purpose. So we're going to do 2 examples today, but then you're going to get a few to practice, and they're going to be different. You're like, he didn't show me one like this. No, that's right. That's the whole point of this process, is there's a problem-solving element to it. And then the one on the test might be different still. There's not a huge number of different kinds of questions you could ask, but that's kind of the point, is this process is about you understanding the information you're given and how you can pull out what you need from that information. So it's not a step-by-step process. It is a problem-solving process. That being said, I suppose you could memorize, if you're given a couple of points, what could that show you? And there will be similarities between some of the questions. Ultimately, okay, so we're determining the equation. Those are our instructions. It says right here, determine the equation of a function that has its maximum there, its minimum there, and a period of pi. That's the information you're given in this case. In order to write the equation, what do I ultimately need? Yeah. That's going to get me part of the way. That would be useful, answering the 5 key questions, which gets me properties of the graph. But I still need to take those 5 key questions and turn them into something, don't I, Brad? Is that a hand up?
Yeah, you need to get like A, K, C, and D.
Yes, right? Those are the values we need, because those are the 4 values. The rest of the equation is all the same, whether it's sine or cosine, but you need to figure out what the A value is, what the K value is, what the C value is, what the D value is, and the form of the equation, which hopefully you know. You plug those in and you got it.
Could this be both sine and?
Good question. It's not dictated which one's which, so we're going to do both. Some questions might say do a cosine, do a sine. It might say do both. Some questions could possibly be dictated by the information given. I think that's possible, although it would have to kind of give you extra information. And if it doesn't say, and it doesn't say do both, or it doesn't say do one or the other, then it's up to you. You do whichever one you want, whichever one's easier, whichever one jumps out at you, that kind of thing. And in fact, in our second example, you're going to see that sometimes not every property is going to be dictated by the information given. And in that case, there's like some ambiguity to it. And so you would just, you'll see what I mean by this, but you kind of fill in what you know, and the rest of it you don't worry about. Adam.
Don't you know that it's not cosine? Don't you know that it's sine here?
How? Why would you say that?
Because on cos, the max and the min would be exactly the period length away from each other.
Are they?
Oh wait, I guess it'd be half.
Okay, yeah, and that's an important, we're going to get back to this, but it would be half always, right? And whether it's sine or cosine, this is something to think about. We'll talk about it in a bit. It won't make a difference, because cosine starts at the max and ends at the max.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
You don't know where the max is. Yeah.
Okay, so we need the A, the K, the C, and the D. What jumps out at you? Some things are easier than others, I think.
The K is a half.
How'd you get that?
It's the period is pi, and a normal graph would be 2 pi, like the base graph. So.
Okay, very good. So the K value comes from 2 pi divided by the period, which we're just given the period. We wouldn't necessarily always be given the period, but in this case we were. 2 pi divided by pi, which is 2. Very often, when we're doing this kind of stuff with these kinds of equations, or we're doing the graphing or whatever, the k is a number, and when I do this, the pi's like divide out. They divide to 1. But when we do applications tomorrow, you'll see that it doesn't happen there. So with applications, that often doesn't happen, but with these graphs where we're like doing more accurate graphing, it does happen. What else, Adam?
You can figure out the A value.
How do I do that?
So you have both y values, the 5 and the 1, so you can figure out the difference between them and then divide by 2.
So remember, the A value is the max minus the min, y values, divided by 2. And in this case, that is 5 minus 1 divided by 2, which is 4 divided by 2, which is 2. So my A value is 2. Very good. What else? So we've got C and D left.
C is a free.
How do you know?
Because the max and the min are, you subtract 1 from 5 and divide it by 2, so you get 2, and then you go you go 2 down from 5 and
Nice.
2 up from 1.
Okay, so you mean the D value. It's funny, sometimes the D and the C get flipped, so which letter is which, but you're talking about the vertical translation, that right?
Yeah.
Oh. So what Lucas said was you start at the max and go down the amplitude to get to the 0 line, which is also the vertical shift, or you start at the minimum and go up the amplitude to get to the 0 line. What's the other way that you can do it? There's 2 ways. Both work just as well. I like both because I can do both and check to make sure that everything I've done so far is correct. Does anybody know what the other one is? Yep. It's the middle of the max and the min. Another way of finding the middle of 2 numbers is taking their average. That's what an average is when it's 2 numbers in particular. You add them up and divide by 2. That finds the middle of the 2 numbers. So this one's the max plus the min divided by 2, which is 5 plus 1 divided by 2, which is 6, divided by 2, which is 3, which is what Lucas told us by just thinking about the amplitude and the max and the min. So it all fits. So far, I think I'm good. What am I missing? The C value. What's the C value going to be?
Wait, isn't that the C value?
No. So I think in grade 11, you called the C value the vertical shift, but we call it the D value. I know it's really confusing, but don't worry about it. In the end, it doesn't really matter as long as, I guess, you're consistent and you write the equation correctly. But if you look back at our notes, you'll notice that I've been consistent in calling C and D these things throughout. Yeah, it's ridiculous. Sometimes it's P and Q. Sometimes it's H and K for quadratics. Sometimes it's A, K, C, and D. Sometimes it's A, K, D, and C. It's ridiculous. Every textbook's different and everything. Isaac.
The C value would be pi by 3.
Why did you pick that?
Because period's pi, and max is the second. Oh wait, sorry. So pi by 3.
Which graph are you thinking of? What are you picturing in your head?
Sine.
Sine. Where does sine start? On the 0 line. We don't have one of those points, so we'd have to figure that out. It's a little bit harder. What if I was doing cosine? Where does cosine start? This one would start at pi by 3 because cosine starts at the max. So if I'm doing cos, my C value would be pi by 3, that maximum. Also important to notice that pi by 3 is the same as 2 pi by 6. Is that right? And that comes before 5 pi by 6. If I had given you those points out of order and with different denominators to trick you, this would have had a reflection starting at the minimum. Can you visualize that? Not that I'm trying to trick you, but you see what I mean? So because these points left to right, the maximum comes first, I would say cosine would start without a reflection in this case, with this phase shift. Adam?
Would it start at pi over 6?
Pi over 6, what do you mean, would it? If it was sine?
Yeah.
Do you think that works? Let's see if we can figure this out. Now, you could be asked for both, in which case you'd have to do a little bit of extra work. But if you didn't, like in this case we didn't, we'd be done because we've got all the values. The cosine would be easier in this case. We could go ahead and write the equation. But this is something that you should think about, and this is what I was talking about before. Let's go ahead and do a little sketch here. And I've got a maximum at pi by 3, so I'm going to count by, let's see, 1 pi by 12, 2 pi by 12, 3 pi by 12, 4 pi by 12, which is pi by 3, and I'm going to go up to 5. That was 4. 5 pi by 12, 6 pi by 12, which is pi by 2, 7 pi by 12, 8 pi by 12, 9 pi by 12, 10, 11, 12 pi by 12, 13, 14, 15 pi by 12. I'm just going to label it that way for now. I don't know how far we have to go, but that's lots, I think. The minimum is at 5 pi by 6, which is 10 pi by 12. So if I wanted to find that point, I believe it would be right here, and it is at 1. And I've gone 2 pi by 6 to 5 pi by 6, which is just change of 3 pi by 6. Is everybody okay with that? Which is half pi by 2, which is half the period, so that makes sense. So if I really wanted to sketch all of this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I'd go another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, look, I didn't quite have enough. 6 to get there. And this is where it does get tricky. And as you're practicing, I would encourage you to think through this. I just sketched this out. This isn't part of the problem, but I'm trying to think about this. If I was required to do sine, I've got 6 between these 2 points. So half of that would be 3, right? 1, 2, 3. So my other critical value would be there. Or 1, 2, 3 there. Okay, and my graph would go something like this. Ooh, that kind of went off there, but that's okay. And then if I wanted to continue it back to find sine, I'd have to go 3 back. Are people still following this? It's a little tricky to get the first point for sine. And what is that point?
I got 3 pi over 12 for the phase shift.
3 pi over 12 for the phase shift? No, I don't think so. It's pi by 12, 1 pi by 12. Why'd you get 3?
Because 1/4 of pi is pi over 4, and then to fit it with, like, find the scale for it.
Okay, so you're talking about a scale. That would be fine. Oh, yeah. I don't.
And doesn't it just shift over 1?
Well, we don't know where the shift is. That's what we're trying to figure out. Where would sine start? 1/4 of the graph. That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
So 1/4 of the graph you said is pi by 4.
Yeah.
And we were at pi by 3. So what's pi by 3 minus pi by 4? I'm not sure that's the best way of doing it, but it would work if that works for you. I think that might confuse some people.
Okay.
Did you follow that? So what is pi by 3 minus pi by 4? And it would work out to pi by 12. What do you think? So let's go ahead and write these equations. So y equals the a value, which is 2. I'm going to start with cos. The k value, which was also 2, bracket x minus pi by 3. That was the phase shift for cos. Plus 3, I believe, was our d value. Is that right? Yeah. And then if I wanted to do the other ones, y equals 2 sine 2. The amplitude and the k value don't change. X minus pi by 12 plus 3.
Oh, okay. I know what you're talking about now. Okay.
Any questions about that? We're going to do one more. So like I said, that's one kind of question. It gave you the max and the min and the period. And we deduced the information we needed to come up with the equation. We did both for a little bit of extra practice, but based on that information. Maybe, like you say, you take the period divided by 4 and you know the distance between critical point. Like that might be a helpful way of thinking about it. We know that half the period will be the distance between the max and min. For cosine, is it true for sine as well? It better be true for sine. It's the same graph. Of course it's going to be the same. No. Okay. No problem. Fine. Okay, let's do the next one. So this one may be easier. Determine the equation of a sine curve with a start and stop that are given and an amplitude of 3. Now, again, our goal is A, K, C, and D. And you can get caught up in like, not sure. I'm not sure where to start, or like what do I do? So you could even write down A equals K equals C. Like you could start with that. You got to leave yourself some space because sometimes you got to do a bit of work, but you got to make sure that and do it one at a time. Okay, I'll try for the A value first. And things are going to jump out differently at different people, for different people. Okay, but ultimately that's what you have to do. Do these points make sense for a sine curve? Where does sine start? At the 0 line. Where does it end? So they have the same vertical shift. They have the same y value. That does make sense. So what jumps out at you? So the A value, and it is? Nice. So if that jumps out at you, it just gives us the amplitude. That was easy. How? Yeah, so it is. That was easy. What else?
The 0 line.
What is it?
It's just this negative one.
And that's the
sine curve would start on the D value.
so it's the D value. Thank you. That's right. This question gave us 3 things right off the bat. That was pretty easy. That was a little bit more helpful. What do we have left to find? And if you notice that, then you're like, okay, now all I need is K. And then you think to yourself, how do I find K? K is 2 pi divided by the period. Didn't give us a period. We don't know the period. Very nice. Stop, subtract the start. I had somebody this morning say, well, hey, I've got 3 to the negative side and 13 to the positive side. So isn't that 16 total? So 16 pi by 4, like without actually doing the subtraction, right? 3 to one side of the y and then 13 to the other side. That's 16 total. Nice way to visualize it. Really nice way of visualizing why subtracting negatives is the same as adding. So this works out to, so hold on, the period is 13 pi by 4 minus negative 3 pi by 4, which is 16 pi by 4, which is 4 pi. So this is 2 pi divided by 4 pi, 1/2. What's the one thing we're missing? Thing? The reflection. We don't know. There's nothing in this information that tells us if there's a reflection or not. So that's the part that you could add it or not. All right? Doesn't make a difference. If it gave us the max and the min, we would know which one maybe came first. And in that case, we would be able to do it. But in this case, it doesn't. So we can go ahead and y equals the A value, sine the K value, x plus 3 pi by 4. Be careful of that. I could certainly see people messing that up. Minus 1. Every question's a little bit different. Some of them are going to be similar, but a little bit different, and that's the point. Any questions? Focus on those 4 letters, A, K, C, and D, and just pick one and try to figure it out. Sometimes it might be easier to start with one, but sometimes you can kind of go with all of them. Frank, do you have a question?
So y equal -2.
Or it could be -3. That's right. Yeah, you could do either. But we don't know, right? Could be either. Okay.